Hi everyone, welcome to week 8 of your college algebra class. We are going to be covering chapter 10 this week. This chapter is all about radical expressions, equations, and functions. So the very first section of this chapter is really the most important section because this is where we're going to be doing all of the vocabulary, all of the defining of terms, all of the information that you're going to need for the remainder of the chapter. So it's really important that you understand the topics covered in section 1. If you have any problem with this section, before you move on, please reach out to me so that we can get your questions cleared up. So you're going to be talking about these different topics in this section. When we think about a radical expression, when we think about squares and square roots, what we want to do is we want to think about it like this. Anytime we take two numbers, or I should say a number, and multiply it by itself, we're going to get the square of that number. So when we undo that, when we do the reverse, that's called the square root. So the square root means finding out what two numbers we multiplied together to get to a specific number. So they've got, again, some definitions. These are some of the things that they're going to define for you in here. When we think of a positive real number, it always has two square roots. So, for example, the square root of 9 could be 3 or negative 3. So it's really important that we understand that there could be two square roots. It could be 3, could be negative 3. You know, just kind of keep that basic idea in the back of your mind when you think of it with numbers, and then as we get into other expressions and things like that, that's going to be really important to understand. Of course, the number 0 just has 1. It's just 0 itself. So, but that's really, really key as we go through this first section. Now, the fact that negative numbers don't have a real number square root, basically what that means is you can't take the square root of negative 9 and get a real number. We can take the square root of negative 9, but we're not going to touch on that until the very last section of this chapter. So when you get to section 8 of chapter 10, we're going to throw in imaginary numbers. That's how we deal with the square roots of negatives. So we're at this point, keep in mind, you know, we can't really do negatives in square roots until we get to the very end of this chapter. So just keep that in the back of your mind as well. So this is just an example. You know, they're showing you 16 here. 16 has both negative 4 and 4 as the square roots because we can take either one of those and multiply them by themselves to get 16. And they use the negative 9 as an example. We cannot take the square root of negative 9 and get a real number. Again, we're going to be able to deal with that, but just not yet. All right. So we define the principal square root as the non-negative square root. So if we're taking the square root of, back to that example before, 16, taking the square root of 16, we remember it's got 2, negative 4 or 4. The principal one is defined as being the positive one. So if we're just asked to find the square root, we're going to assume that it's the principal one, so it's the positive. If we want the negative one, notice how they show that. They have that negative symbol in front of the square root sign. So that's how you know that you're dealing with the negative square root. So we're going to be going through and doing some examples, simplifying all of these. Here's, you know, just some basics. The square root of 81 is going to be 9. The negative square root of 16 over 81 is negative 4 over 9. So notice they have that negative symbol on the outside. So this is just how to use your calculator to approximate some of these. Keep in mind that not everything is what we call a perfect square. So when they ask you to find the approximation, they're going to typically tell you what place to round to. Then we're going to move into the definition of that symbol. So the actual symbol is called the radical sign, and the expression that's written with that symbol is called the radical expression, and then everything under it is the radicand. So defining those are going to be important as we go through this chapter too. So in this particular example, the radicand is everything under that square root symbol. So that x squared minus 16 is the radicand. And we're going to be using that information to solve problems as we go forward. So again, if you have any problems as you're going through this section, please make sure that you reach out to me and make sure you really have a handle on section 1 before you move into sections 2 through 8. And as always, please call, text, or email with anything you might need. My number is 618-792-2293. Have a great week.